Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Under the glow of dusk, a silver dress shimmered on the closet door, standing out sharply against the bedroom's beige walls and casting its evanescent reflection on the carpet. It echoed a year of changes, days of wonders, nights of haunting mystery. On his bed, Israel's fingers danced on his leg as he gazed at the dress. The sequins glinted, guarding hidden truths beyond his comprehension, beyond recollection. Touching the fabric gingerly, he relived the night of Peter's glamorous 20s bash when he'd donned this dress. "Costumes," he'd joked uncertainly. "My playful alter ego." Yet those words fell flat, clung to the air in his bathroom as his reflection's gaze pierced through the disguise, betraying a yearning to comprehend it all. "It suits you." Monica's words, sincere, unmistakable, reverberated in his ears, unlike any typical party compliment. "Like you were meant to wear that. If you told me you were actually a woman, I'd believe you." Peter had laughed, clinking his champagne glass against Israel's. Those words had stayed with him long after the party ended, echoing in his mind during quiet moments at work, in the shower, driving home. They weren't just compliments about a costume well executed. They had cracked something open inside him, something that had been locked away for 35 years. Standing up abruptly, Israel walked to his dresser and pulled out the small appointment card he'd tucked between his socks. The date was circled in red. Today. The gender identity specialist had managed to fit him in after a cancellation. He'd been on the waiting list for months. His hands trembled as he opened his closet, pushing past the button-downs and slacks that had always felt like uniforms rather than expressions of self. At the far end, hidden behind winter coats, hung a simple beige dress he'd purchased online 3 weeks ago. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed for attention, just a simple, modest dress that a woman might wear to a doctor's appointment. The fabric felt cool against his skin as he slipped it on. He'd practiced this, late at night when the apartment building was quiet. The zipper, the adjustments, the way to stand. The beige complemented his fair skin, and the cut was forgiving of his broader shoulders. In the bathroom mirror, he applied minimal makeup, just enough to soften the angles of his face. The short blonde wig he'd bought sat neatly on his head, not as elaborate as the one from the party, but more practical for everyday wear.
"Israel,"
he whispered to his reflection, testing the name he'd carried all his life. It didn't feel right anymore. Hadn't for some time. "Kaya," he tried instead, a name he'd been rolling around in his mind for weeks. It felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. The drive to the clinic took 30 minutes, each mile marker passing like a countdown to something monumental. He'd told his boss he had a medical appointment. Technically true, and had cleared his afternoon. His khaki jacket covered most of the dress, a security blanket of sorts, as he walked from the parking lot to the clinic doors. The waiting room was quiet, with soft music playing and plants in every corner. A woman behind the reception desk smiled as he approached. "I have an appointment with Dr. Levine," he said, voice higher than his usual register, but not forced. "The name is Israel Markson." "Of course," the receptionist said, without a second glance at his appearance. "Please fill out these forms, and the doctor will see you shortly." The forms asked questions he'd never seen on medical paperwork before. Questions about identity, about how long he'd felt disconnected from his assigned gender, about what he hoped to achieve. His pen hovered over preferred name, and after a moment's hesitation, he wrote Kaya in his neat handwriting. Dr. Levine was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. Her office was lined with books and featured photographs of her hiking in various national parks. "Israel?" she called, looking around the waiting room. He stood, clutching his jacket closed. "That's me!" Inside her office, she gestured to a comfortable chair across from her desk.
"Before we begin, I'd like to know how you prefer to be addressed."
The question was simple, but profound.
"I've been thinking of myself as Kaya,"
he said, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff.
"Kaya,"
Dr. Levine repeated with a warm smile.
"That's a beautiful name. Would you prefer she, her pronouns?"
The question made his chest tighten with emotion. "Yes," she said. "I would." The conversation that followed was unlike any medical appointment she'd ever had. Dr. Levine listened more than she spoke, asking thoughtful questions about Kaya's experiences, her feelings, her history with gender. There was no judgment, no rush to diagnose or prescribe, just a genuine effort to understand. "The process of transition is different for everyone," Dr. Levine explained toward the end of their session. "Some people focus on social transition first, changing names, pronouns, clothing. Others prioritize medical interventions like hormone therapy or surgeries. There's no right or wrong way to do this, Kaya." "I think I've been socially transitioning in private for a while," Kaya admitted. "But I'm ready for more. I want my outside to match how I feel inside." Dr. Levine nodded. "We can discuss hormone therapy today if you'd like. I can explain the effects, timeline, risks, and benefits." By the time Kaya left the clinic, she had a prescription for hormone therapy, a list of recommended therapists specializing in gender identity, and a follow-up appointment scheduled for 1 month later. The beige dress no longer felt like a disguise, but like the first honest thing she'd worn in public. In her car, she sat for a long moment, looking at the prescription in her hand. This small piece of paper represented the beginning of something enormous. She thought about the silver dress hanging in her bedroom, how it had been a catalyst, revealing a truth she'd been hiding even from herself. The pharmacy was busy when she arrived. Standing in line, she felt exposed, as if everyone could see that she was in transition, not just her clothes, but her entire being. A woman in front of her smiled politely, the same casual acknowledgement she would give any other woman in line. The simplicity of that interaction nearly brought tears to Kaya's eyes. At home, she stood in front of her closet, the beige dress now hanging alongside the silver one. 2 pieces of fabric that represented so much more than clothing. With determination, she began sorting through her wardrobe, creating piles. Keep, donate, replace. The process was both practical and symbolic, clearing space for her true self. The first month of hormone therapy was subtle. Kaya continued to work remotely as much as possible, scheduling in-person meetings strategically. She bought more clothes, simple blouses and soft fabrics, a navy pencil skirt that hugged her hips, cardigans that softened her silhouette. Each piece was carefully selected to work with her body as it was, while giving her room to evolve. Her second appointment with Dr. Levine went well. They discussed the minimal physical changes, but focused more on the emotional effects. "I feel more present," Kaya explained. "Like I'm finally inhabiting my body instead of driving it from a distance." Dr. Levine nodded. "That's a common experience. As your body begins to align with your identity, that dissociation often decreases." By the 3rd month, changes were becoming more noticeable. Her skin was softer, facial hair growth slower. Small breasts had begun to develop, tender and real. She'd started growing out her natural hair, foregoing the wig more often as her own blonde locks reached past her ears in a stylish bob. Work presented its own challenges. Kaya had been employed at the same accounting firm for 7 years, known by colleagues and clients alike as Israel. After careful consideration and conversations with HR, she decided it was time to come out professionally. The email was composed and recomposed a dozen times before she finally hit send, a brief professional note to her department explaining her transition, her new name, and her pronouns. She ended by thanking them in advance for their understanding and respect. Responses trickled in throughout the day. Simple acknowledgments, words of support, a few questions about how to handle client communications. There were awkward moments in the weeks that followed. Old habits of language to break, explanations to give to confused clients. But there was also unexpected warmth, like when the office manager quietly updated her nameplate without being asked, or when her team switched pronouns without missing a beat during their weekly conference call. 6 months into her transition, Kaya caught sight of herself in a store window while shopping downtown. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse tucked into dark jeans, her growing blonde hair framing her face. The woman reflected back was undeniably her, not a costume, not a persona, but her authentic self taking form. She smiled at her reflection, a spontaneous expression of recognition and joy. That evening, she met her friend Monica for dinner, the first friend she'd seen from the party where everything had started. They sat at a small table by the window, Monica's expression a mixture of curiosity and support. "You look amazing," Monica said after they'd ordered. "I mean that. You look right." Kaya felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. I feel right for the first time ever." "I keep thinking about what I said at Peter's party," Monica admitted, swirling her wine. "About how natural you looked. I had no idea what you were going through, but somehow I saw you, the real you, even then." "That comment stayed with me," Kaya said. "It was like you'd seen something I was still trying to hide from myself." Their conversation flowed easily after that initial acknowledgement, catching up on months of life changes, not just Kaya's transition, but Monica's promotion, their mutual friends, plans for the future. By dessert, Kaya realized they were talking as two women, two friends, the most natural thing in the world. As months passed, Kaya's confidence grew alongside the physical changes. She expanded her wardrobe, experimenting with styles and colors that suited her evolving body. Her blonde hair grew past her shoulders, and she learned to style it in ways that framed her feminizing face. Voice training helped her develop a speaking voice that felt authentic and matched her appearance. There were difficult moments, too. Family members who struggled to understand, acquaintances who disappeared from her life, strangers whose stares lingered too long. But for each of these challenges, there were unexpected allies and moments of affirmation that balanced the scales. 1 year after her first appointment with Dr. Levine, Kaya stood in her bedroom, looking at the silver dress that had started everything. Peter's annual themed party was approaching, a 1930s soiree this time. The invitation had arrived addressed to Kaya Markson, a small detail that had made her smile. She slipped the dress off its hanger, holding it against her body. It would fit differently now. Her hormone therapy had redistributed weight, created curves, softened angles. The woman who would wear this dress was not the same person who had worn it as a costume a year ago. The night of the party arrived, cool and clear. Kaya took her time getting ready, applying makeup with practiced hands, styling her natural blonde hair in soft waves reminiscent of the era. The silver dress slid over her head, settling against her transformed body, fitting properly now, as if it had been waiting for this moment. In the full-length mirror, she saw herself complete. Not a man in a costume, not a person in transition, but simply Kaya, a woman in a beautiful dress, ready to celebrate with friends. The journey wasn't over. Transition was a long road with no real endpoint, but this milestone deserved acknowledgement. Peter's eyes widened when he opened the door.
Kaya,
He breathed, taking in the silver dress.
you came full circle.
She smiled, stepping into the warm light of his home. It seemed fitting. The party was filled with familiar faces, many of whom had been present that pivotal night a year ago. There were subtle differences in how they interacted with her now, not because they were treating her differently as a woman, but because she carried herself differently, with an authenticity that invited genuine connection. Later in the evening, she found a quiet moment with Peter on his balcony, the sounds of the party muffled behind them. The night air was cool against her bare arms, and she wrapped them around herself, looking out at the city lights.
I've been thinking about last year's party all night,
Peter said, leaning against the railing beside her.
You looked beautiful then, but there was something in your eyes, something uncertain, almost afraid.
Kaya nodded, remembering the tumult of emotions she'd experienced that night. I was terrified. I think I knew, deep down, that it wasn't just a costume for me. That party was the beginning of something I couldn't ignore anymore. And now? Peter asked gently. She turned to look at him, a smile spreading across her face. Now I'm just me. Finally. Completely me. The silver dress caught the moonlight as they rejoined the party, sequins flickering like stars. Kaya moved through the crowd with confidence, laughing, dancing, existing in her truth. The dress that had once been a disguise was now simply a beautiful garment worn by a woman celebrating life with friends. In the year that followed, Kaya's life settled into new rhythms. Her professional reputation as a skilled accountant remained unchanged, while her personal life blossomed with authentic connections. She continued her medical transition, each appointment with Dr. Levine marking progress, not just in physical changes, but in emotional well-being. Her wardrobe evolved with the seasons and her changing body, flowing summer dresses in bright colors, structured blazers for work in autumn tones, cozy sweaters and boots as winter approached. The beige dress from her first appointment hung in the back of her closet, a reminder of courage and beginnings. The silver dress, meanwhile, held a place of honor, worn for special occasions when she wanted to remember how far she'd come. 2 years into her transition, Kaya received an unexpected email from a local community college asking if she would speak to their accounting students about her career path. The invitation made no mention of her transition. It was purely professional, recognizing her expertise in the field. Standing at the podium in a forest green dress that complemented her blonde hair, Kaya spoke confidently about accounting principles, career development, and industry trends. During the Q&A session, a student raised her hand. "This isn't about accounting," the young woman said hesitantly. "But I recognized your name when the talk was announced. I think your journey has inspired a lot of people. Would you mind sharing any advice for those of us still trying to figure out who we are?" The question hung in the air. Kaya took a deep breath, looking out at the diverse faces watching her expectantly. This wasn't what she had prepared for, but it was an opportunity for honesty. "My advice would be this," she said after a moment. "Listen to yourself, not to the voices telling you who you should be or how you should live, but to that quiet voice inside that knows who you truly are. It took me 35 years to really hear that voice, but once I did, everything else.
even the hard parts, became worth it because I was finally living authentically. The room was silent for a moment before erupting in applause. After the talk, several students approached her, some with questions about accounting, others simply wanting to express gratitude for her willingness to share both her professional and personal wisdom. As years passed, Kaya's transition became less the defining feature of her life and more simply a part of her history. She was promoted at work, developed new friendships, reconnected with family members who had initially struggled but eventually came to understand. The woman she had always been was now fully present in the world, recognized by others as she had finally recognized herself. On the 5th anniversary of her first appointment with Dr. Levine, Kaya decided to celebrate. She invited her closest friends for dinner at her apartment. Monica, Peter, colleagues who had become friends, new connections made along the way. She wore the silver dress, now altered slightly to better fit her mature female form. Her home was filled with laughter and conversation, the warm glow of friendship illuminating the space. After dinner, as everyone gathered in the living room with dessert and coffee, Peter raised his glass. "To Kaya," he said, his expression warm with affection. 5 years ago, she took the bravest step I've ever witnessed, the step toward becoming herself. I'm honored to have been there at the beginning, and even more honored to be here now, celebrating the amazing woman she is. Glasses clinked as everyone echoed the toast. Kaya looked around at the faces of her friends, feeling a profound sense of belonging that had once seemed impossible. Later, after her guests had departed, and she was alone in the quiet of her apartment, Kaya stood before her mirror, the silver dress still catching light in the dimness of her bedroom. She traced the sequins with her fingertips, remembering the costume party that had changed everything, the appointment in the beige dress, the gradual integration of her true self into the world. 5 years ago, she had stood before a similar mirror, questioning everything she thought she knew about herself. The silver dress hadn't been just a costume, but a glimpse of possibility, a window into a future where she could live authentically. Now, that future was her present. The woman in the mirror was simply Kaya, her blonde hair falling in soft waves around her face, her body and soul aligned at last. The silver dress was no longer a catalyst or a symbol. It was just a beautiful dress, worn by a woman celebrating her life. She smiled at her reflection, a gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude to the person she had become and the journey that had brought her here. Then she carefully removed the dress, hanging it back in her closet among her other clothes. No longer hidden, no longer separate, just one garment among many in the wardrobe of a woman living her truth. As she prepared for bed, Kaya thought about what lay ahead, not just the next day or week, but the years to come. There would be challenges, of course. Life guaranteed those for everyone. But she would face them as herself, with a wholeness and authenticity that made even difficulties more manageable. She had once feared that transition would define her forever, that she would always be seen as before and after. What she discovered instead was that becoming Kaya hadn't created a new person, but had revealed the person who was always there, now free to live, love, work, laugh, and grow without the constant weight of pretense. The silver dress would continue to hang in her closet, perhaps worn again for future celebrations, or perhaps eventually retired as styles changed and new favorite garments took its place. Either way, its significance remained, not as a costume, but as a catalyst for authenticity, a glittering reminder that sometimes the most pivotal moments in life arrive unexpectedly, disguised as something as simple as a party dress catching the light.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!